Let me say, can I say one thing? Please. To me, the great Stanley Kubrick was an actor's enemy.
Well, he did 100 takes.
He was an actor's enemy. And I can point to movies that he's done.
Imagine a world where science, technology, and intelligence don't just evolve, they collide, where reality bends, questions multiply, and the line between what we know and what we assume begins to blur. What if everything you've believed about progress, power, and purpose was only part of the story?
80% asshole, 20% a good guy, the next day may reverse it. You know what I'm saying? But you know, I haven't just played Western. One of my favorite parts I've ever played is when I played Joseph Stalin.
When people talk about some of the greatest filmmakers of all time, the name Stanley Kubrick almost always comes up. Known for classics like 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, and The Shining, Kubrick built a reputation for being a perfectionist. His work continues to influence generations of directors and actors. However, that same reputation for perfection came with a great deal of criticism, particularly from those who worked closely with him. One of the more vocal critics was actor Robert Duvall, who referred to Kubrick as, in his words, an actor's enemy. Duvall's comment may sound harsh, especially considering the widespread admiration Kubrick receives. But from Duvall's perspective, his criticism wasn't just about being difficult or personal dislike. It was about respect for the acting profession and how Kubrick's directing methods, in his view, ignored the emotional and psychological demands placed on performers. Kubrick was known for doing many takes of the same scene, sometimes dozens, and in extreme cases, over 100. He believed that repetition could strip away pretense and get to the raw truth of a performance. While some directors use a few takes to capture spontaneity, Kubrick wanted to wear down the actors until all artifice was gone. This style, some say, led to extraordinary performances. Others, like Duvall, believed it crossed a line. Duvall questioned how Kubrick could even tell the difference between the first and 70th take. To him, it seemed more like obsessive control than genuine artistry. He suggested that Kubrick's goal wasn't to collaborate with actors, but to push them to a point where they stopped thinking for themselves and simply obeyed direction. In Duvall's view, that method takes away the creative part of acting, which is based on human emotion, instincts, and personal interpretation of a character. Although Duvall didn't work with Kubrick directly, his opinion seems to have been shaped by watching others suffer through those experiences. He didn't just express dislike for Kubrick's methods, he pointed to actual performances in Kubrick's films that he felt suffered as a result. For example, he cited Jack Nicholson's performance in The Shining and Malcolm McDowell's portrayal of Alex in A Clockwork Orange as examples of what he considered to be overacted or forced performances. While many film fans and critics consider those roles iconic, Duvall saw them differently. He believed they were products of over-direction. Actors pushed past their limits and ultimately gave performances that lacked truth and felt exaggerated or mechanical. It's worth mentioning that others have also spoken about the toll of working with Kubrick, though usually in more measured terms. Shelley Duvall, for instance, who played Wendy Torrance in The Shining, has talked about the extreme emotional stress she experienced on set. She was reportedly made to do one scene over 120 times, and Kubrick was said to have isolated her to help her get into character. While she later acknowledged how difficult the shoot was, she stopped short of directly criticizing Kubrick's process, often expressing mixed feelings, respect for the end result, but discomfort with how it was achieved. Robert Duvall's remarks went further. He didn't try to soften his stance or play politics. He simply stated that Kubrick didn't respect actors. For him, filmmaking should be a partnership between director and performer, where both contribute equally to the creative process. Duvall believed that directors should trust actors and allow them space to explore their characters, rather than control every detail and force them into an emotional corner. In short, Duvall came to control every detail and force them into an emotional corner. This is an important difference in approach. Many actors thrive when they feel supported, respected, and part of a creative team. Being pushed too hard, too often, can lead to exhaustion, frustration, and sometimes even long-term emotional effects. Duvall seemed particularly upset by the idea that actors were reduced to tools or instruments rather than treated as artists in their own right. It's also relevant to look at Duvall's background. He's known for being deeply committed to his roles and for working with directors who valued the actor's input. He's had memorable collaborations with filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola in The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, and with Robert Altman in Mass Age. These directors, while demanding, were known for giving actors a certain level of freedom and trusting their instinct. Duvall clearly responded well to that kind of environment. So, when he looked at Kubrick's work and the experiences of actors on his sets, he didn't see genius, he saw manipulation. He believed that when a director dominates the process so completely, something vital is lost. The human part of the performance, the soul, as some might say, is pushed aside. It's not uncommon for directors to have strong personalities or unique methods. What made Kubrick stand out was the extreme nature of his approach. Stories from his sets often describe long hours, endless retakes, and little tolerance for deviation from his vision. For some actors, that was challenging but worthwhile. For others, it was overwhelming, and for critics like Duvall, it was simply unacceptable. That doesn't mean Duvall's view is the only valid one. Many actors who worked with Kubrick spoke positively about the experience, or at least acknowledged that his methods led to powerful results. But Duvall's honesty provides a rare counterpoint in a world where people often avoid criticizing big names. His willingness to speak out suggests he felt it was important, not just as a personal opinion, but as a statement about how actors should be treated in the industry. In a way, Duvall's remarks open a broader conversation about the balance of power in filmmaking. At what point does the pursuit of a perfect scene become harmful? Is it acceptable to emotionally exhaust actors if the final product is brilliant? Or should there be limits, boundaries, and mutual respect at the core of every working relationship on a film set? These are not easy questions, and opinions differ widely, but Duvall's position is clear. To him, no film, no matter how great, was worth the damage caused by mistreating the people who helped make it. His stance challenges the idea that genius excuses everything. Instead, it puts emphasis back on process, on ethics, and on the people behind the scenes. In recent years, the film industry has become more open to discussing the emotional and mental health of artists. Stories like Shelley Duvall's have been re-examined in a new light, and there's more awareness now of how pressure on set can affect people. In this context, Robert Duvall's words carry even more weight. He may have said them bluntly, but his core message, that actors deserve respect, feels more relevant than ever. As Robert Duvall's career has spanned over 6 decades, and he's earned a reputation not only for the depth of his performances, but also for his strong opinions about filmmaking. While some actors are diplomatic about their past experiences, Duvall has been refreshingly candid. One such experience that left a permanent mark on him was his time filming True Grit, 1969, which brought him into direct conflict with the film's director, Henry Hathaway. Their clash is one of the more intense actor-director tensions in Hollywood history, and Duvall has not shied away from sharing just how difficult it was for him to work under Hathaway's direction. At the time of True Grit, Henry Hathaway was already a well-established filmmaker. Known for a more traditional, old-school approach to directing, Hathaway had worked on dozens of westerns and adventure films. He had a reputation for being firm and uncompromising on set. His methods worked for some actors, but they clashed dramatically with Duvall's process, which leaned heavily into emotional authenticity and character immersion. Duvall has spoken in interviews about how Hathaway would bark orders on set and expect immediate compliance, treating the actors more like chess pieces than collaborators. He reportedly told Duvall how to say each line, where to move, and how to gesture, all with little room for interpretation. This didn't sit well with Duvall, who believed in discovering moments organically, using instinct and internal understanding to shape a character, rather than taking direction that felt imposed from the outside. Their confrontations became a regular occurrence during the production. According to Duvall, Hathaway would shout at him in front of the crew, sometimes even mocking his acting choices or demanding that he just say the damn lines. Duvall, who was still early in his film career but already respected for roles in To Kill a Mockingbird and stage work, refused to be intimidated. The tension grew with each passing day on set, with Duvall reportedly calling Hathaway the meanest son of a bitch he ever worked with. The tension spilled beyond private exchanges. There's an oft-repeated story, which may or may not be apocryphal, about John Wayne, who was the lead in True Grit and playing the iconic Rooster Cogburn, having to step in to calm things down. Wayne allegedly warned Duvall to back off and show more respect to the director. According to some versions of the story, Wayne told Duvall, "We don't need method crap on this set." While there's no direct confirmation from Wayne himself, the line has stuck in the Hollywood rumor mill and serves as a symbol of the clash between two styles of filmmaking: the more traditional, command-style approach of Hathaway and Wayne, and the more internal, emotionally driven approach of actors like Duvall. What's clear is that the experience left a bitter taste in Duvall's mouth. Even decades later, he continued to mention Hathaway as one of the worst directors he ever worked with. He felt that Hathaway didn't understand the modern actor's process and instead relied on power dynamics and intimidation to get what he wanted. To Duvall, that wasn't directing, that was control. This story also touches on a deeper issue in Hollywood, one that actors like Duvall have spoken about repeatedly: the lack of respect some directors have for the emotional and psychological work actors bring to their performances. While Duvall never claimed that directors needed to be soft or indulgent, he firmly believed that good direction involved collaboration and trust. Directors like Hathaway, in his view, didn't trust actors. They treated them as instruments to play, rather than artists, contributing something unique to the final product. It's interesting to contrast Duvall's clash with Hathaway with his experiences under other directors. For instance, he has consistently praised directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Bruce Beresford, even if there were occasional disagreements. With Coppola on The Godfather, Duvall said there was room to explore and develop the character of Tom Hagen. With Beresford, on Tender Mercies. Though they had creative tension, there was mutual respect. Hathaway, however, represented the opposite, an authoritarian presence who seemed to believe that shouting and ordering actors around would yield the best performances. In the larger context of Duvall's career, the True Grit experience appears to have solidified his resolve to only work on projects where he felt respected. He became known for walking away from films or directors who didn't allow him the space to do the kind of work he believed in. While this might have cost him some roles, it also allowed him to maintain his integrity as an artist. His body of work reflects this approach: rich, layered characters in films that often feel deeply human. What's also notable is how Duvall speaks about True Grit itself. While the film was a commercial success and earned John Wayne his only Academy Award, Duvall's memories are almost entirely dominated by the negative experience of working with Hathaway. He doesn't deny the film's place in American cinema, but it's clear that, for him, the cost of the experience wasn't worth the result. He once said, in a somewhat exasperated tone, "Some directors think yelling is the same thing as directing. It's not." The Hathaway-Duvall conflict also illustrates a generational shift that was happening in Hollywood during the late 1960 CE. The studio system was weakening, and new voices and techniques were emerging. Actors were no longer just hired talent who read lines and hit marks. They were becoming partners in the creative process. Duvall was part of that wave, along with others like Dustin Hoffman, Al Pacino, and Robert De Niro. These actors brought the methods of the theatre and the lessons of the actor's studio into film, and they expected to be treated as equals, not subordinates. Hathaway, a man of the old guard, wasn't prepared for that change. His way of working had been effective in an earlier era, but with actors like Duvall, it created more friction than results. The confrontation between the two men can be seen as a symbolic clash between two eras of filmmaking, each with its own strengths and flaws. Even now, years later, when Robert Duvall reflects on his career, he still references Henry Hathaway when asked about the most difficult people he's worked with. There's no sense that time has softened his view. If anything, his commitment to a certain standard of artistic integrity has only grown stronger. It's a standard that demands respect, thoughtfulness, and above all, an understanding that acting is not mechanical, it's emotional, instinctive, and personal. The viewers of True Grit, the story of what happened behind the scenes, adds an extra layer to the experience. Watching Duvall's performance as Lucky Ned Pepper, you'd never guess the turmoil that was happening during filming. His performance is measured and controlled, serving the story without drawing attention to itself. That's perhaps the most remarkable part of it all. Even under the weight of conflict and frustration, Duvall managed to deliver a performance that still holds up decades later. The sudden collapse of FTX in late 2022 sent shockwaves across the cryptocurrency world, and in its aftermath, questions emerged about how such a prominent exchange could disintegrate seemingly overnight. As investigations deepened, more details began to surface, painting a picture of internal dysfunction, questionable leadership decisions, and a severe lack of financial oversight. At the center of this unraveling story was Sam Bankman-Fried, once hailed as a crypto prodigy, now under intense scrutiny for his role in the downfall. One of the most pressing issues that investigators and media outlets began to focus on was the close and often indistinguishable relationship between FTX and Alameda Research. Alameda was a trading firm co-founded by Sam Bankman-Fried before FTX existed. In theory, it operated separately from the exchange, though owned and influenced by the same people. In practice, however, their relationship was far more entangled than initially understood. Evidence soon emerged suggesting that customer funds deposited into FTX were being funneled into Alameda, where they were used for high-risk trades, venture investments, political donations, and even luxury real estate. Internal records and testimony revealed that Alameda had an almost unlimited line of credit with FTX, reportedly reaching billions of dollars. This credit line was not publicly disclosed to customers, nor was it properly documented in the company's financial reports. The apparent lack of proper accounting controls meant that funds could be moved around with little resistance or accountability. Employees described a work culture where traditional financial management was seen as optional, and where decisions were made quickly and informally, often through messaging apps that automatically deleted conversations after a short time. Concerns were also raised about the role of Caroline Ellison, who served as CEO of Alameda Research. Ellison, a former trader at Jane Street and a close personal associate of Bankman-Fried, was reportedly aware of the financial interdependence between the two companies. In later court filings, Ellison admitted to knowing that Alameda was using FTX customer funds and confessed that this had been going on for years. Her statements were part of a plea deal made with federal prosecutors, and her cooperation added significant weight to the criminal case against Bankman-Fried. As the case unfolded, it became clear that the operation was not just careless, but potentially criminal. Prosecutors charged Bankman-Fried with multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and money laundering. They alleged that he misled investors, customers, and regulators by portraying FTX as a stable and trustworthy platform while secretly diverting funds to support Alameda's risky bets. These bets, often in volatile crypto assets, backfired spectacularly when the broader market began to decline, leaving a multi-billion-dollar hole in the company's balance sheet. Further complicating the story were the relationships between the individuals at the top of FTX and Alameda. Many of them lived together in a luxury penthouse in the Bahamas, where FTX was headquartered. This living arrangement added fuel to speculation about blurred personal and professional boundaries. Staff turnover was high, and decision-making seemed to rely heavily on a small inner circle that operated with minimal oversight. Reports indicated that even senior employees were often unaware of the true state of the company's finances until it was too late. The collapse of FTX had far-reaching consequences beyond just its employees and investors. Tens of thousands of retail customers lost access to their funds, with some losing life savings. Institutional investors, including major venture capital firms and hedge funds, were forced to write off their investments, suffering significant losses. The broader crypto market also took a hit, with prices of many major coins dropping sharply in the weeks following the collapse. Confidence in centralized crypto exchanges plummeted, prompting calls for greater regulation and transparency across the industry. Regulatory bodies in the United States, such as the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, launched investigations into FTX and its associated entities. These investigations raised broader questions about the adequacy of existing crypto regulations and whether companies like FTX were exploiting legal gray areas to operate without meaningful oversight. Lawmakers on both sides of the political spectrum began drafting proposals aimed at tightening controls around crypto exchanges, including stricter reporting requirements and enhanced consumer protection measures. In parallel to the legal and regulatory response, a number of former employees and insiders began speaking out. Some expressed regret for not raising red flags sooner, while others claimed they had been kept in the dark. Several whistleblowers came forward, with documents, emails, and chat logs that helped build the case against Bankman-Fried and his associates. Their testimonies painted a picture of a company that had grown too fast, too chaotically, and with far too much trust placed in a small group of executives who lacked the experience and discipline required to manage billions in assets. Meanwhile, Bankman-Fried maintained his innocence in public statements and media interviews. In the weeks following FTX's bankruptcy filing, he appeared on podcasts, gave interviews, and even participated in a high-profile online conference where he acknowledged mistakes but denied intentional wrongdoing. These appearances were met with widespread criticism and were seen by many as attempts to shape public perception ahead of his trial. Legal experts debated the wisdom of such moves, suggesting they could be used against him in court. As prosecutors built their case, more details emerged about FTX's internal systems. Investigators found that the exchange's risk management tools were either poorly implemented or outright manipulated. For example, Alameda's trading accounts were reportedly exempt from the liquidation protocols that applied to other users, giving them an unfair advantage and allowing them to take on greater risk without consequences. This lack of enforcement not only distorted the trading environment, but also increased the likelihood of a catastrophic failure once market conditions turned. The narrative surrounding FTX also brought attention to the broader culture of the crypto industry at the time. Many startups operated with minimal oversight, raised enormous sums of money based on vague promises, and were celebrated in the media without much scrutiny. Bankman-Fried had been one of the most prominent faces of this trend, often appearing on magazine covers, speaking at global conferences, and meeting with politicians and regulators. His fall from grace was swift and served as a wake-up call for an industry that had grown accustomed to operating in a regulatory vacuum. In addition to the criminal trial, civil lawsuits began to mount. Investors and customers filed class action suits seeking compensation for their losses. Some lawsuits targeted not just Bankman-Fried and FTX, but also celebrities and influencers who had promoted the platform. These legal actions raised new questions about the responsibility of public figures in endorsing financial products and whether they should be held accountable when those products fail. Efforts were also underway to recover and return funds to FTX customers. A court-appointed restructuring team, led by John J. Ray III, who had previously overseen the Enron bankruptcy, was tasked with tracing assets, managing claims, and unwinding the complex web of entities under FTX. Ray's early statements were scathing, describing the situation as a complete failure of corporate controls and the worst case of financial mismanagement he had ever seen. His team's work involved combing through thousands of transactions, locating bank accounts, crypto wallets, and offshore assets in an effort to recoup some of the lost money. While some assets were eventually recovered, the process was slow and complicated. The international nature of FTX's operations meant that legal proceedings spanned multiple jurisdictions, adding layers of complexity to the task. Some crypto assets were locked in wallets without access to the private keys, while others had been converted into more obscure investments, making them harder to track. The downfall of FTX became a cautionary tale for both the crypto industry and the broader financial world. It underscored the risks of unchecked growth, the dangers of excessive centralization, and the need for proper oversight in markets that handle large sums of money. It also highlighted the importance of transparency, corporate governance, and regulatory clarity, lessons that many in the industry vowed to learn, though whether lasting changes would be implemented remained an open question. By the end of 2023, the fallout from FTX's collapse was still being felt. Ongoing trials, regulatory reforms, and industry-wide introspection continued to shape the conversation around the future of cryptocurrency. While new players entered the space and innovation pushed forward, the shadow of FTX loomed large, serving as a reminder of what can happen when ambition, secrecy, and a lack of accountability collide. The development of electric vehicles has been one of the most significant shifts in the automotive industry over the past decade, and few companies have driven this transformation as forcefully as Tesla. However, as the market grows and governments around the world push for a cleaner and more sustainable future, the company now faces increasing pressure from both traditional automakers and new players entering the space. In many ways, the EV landscape is no longer defined by Tesla alone, but by a range of competitors vying for a share of this rapidly growing industry. One of the most prominent rivals Tesla faces is BYD, a Chinese automaker that has seen explosive growth in recent years. In fact, for the final quarter of 2023, BYD briefly surpassed Tesla in terms of global EV sales, selling more battery electric vehicles than the American company during that period. While Tesla still ended the year with the highest total number of EVs sold globally, the momentum behind BYD highlights a broader trend. Tesla is no longer the sole leader in this sector. BYD's success is driven in part by its strength in the Chinese market, which remains the world's largest EV market and a critical battleground for any manufacturer aiming for global dominance. At the same time, legacy automakers are stepping up their game. Companies like Volkswagen, General Motors, and Ford have all committed billions of dollars to the development of electric vehicles and have begun rolling out new models that appeal to a broader customer base. Volkswagen, for example, has launched a line of ID-branded electric cars, while Ford's Mustang Mach-E and F-150 Lightning have received positive reviews and strong consumer interest. Like these manufacturers benefit from decades of experience in building vehicles, extensive supply chains, and global service networks, which can give them a significant advantage when scaling EV production. Another key factor in the competitive landscape is price. Tesla initially positioned itself as a premium EV brand, but as competition has grown, the company has had to adjust its pricing strategy. Throughout 2023 and into 2024, Tesla implemented a series of price cuts across its key markets, including the United States and China. While these reductions helped boost sales in the short term, they also led to tighter profit margins. Tesla's gross margins have decreased from the mid-20s to closer to 17%, a level that has raised concerns among investors. Elon Musk has defended this strategy, arguing that making EVs more affordable is essential for accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy. Still, some industry analysts have questioned whether Tesla's focus on volume over profit could pose long-term risks. Beyond pricing, another crucial area of focus for Tesla is innovation in manufacturing. The company has consistently sought ways to reduce production costs and improve efficiency. One example is the use of gigacasting, a process that involves casting large portions of a vehicle's body in a single piece, which reduces complexity and speeds up assembly. Tesla has also pushed the adoption of vertical integration, designing and building more of its components in-house rather than relying heavily on suppliers. These efforts are aimed at maintaining a competitive edge as other automakers catch up in terms of battery technology and EV performance. Despite this, Tesla has faced criticism over delays in delivering promised technologies. The Cybertruck, originally unveiled in 2019, only began limited production in late 2023, years behind schedule. The Roadster, another highly anticipated model, has also seen multiple delays. While delays are not uncommon in the auto industry, especially with new technologies, the long gaps between announcement and delivery have drawn skepticism from consumers and analysts alike. It has led some to argue that the company's ability to meet its ambitious timelines remains one of its weak points. Then there's the matter of brand perception. Tesla continues to enjoy a loyal customer base and strong brand recognition, especially among early adopters and tech enthusiasts. However, the broader public view of the company has become more complex. Elon Musk, once celebrated as a visionary entrepreneur, has become a polarizing figure. His high-profile involvement in Twitter, his outspoken comments on various political and social issues, and his often erratic communication style have influenced how some people perceive Tesla. For some customers, Musk's behavior is part of the brand's appeal. For others, it's a turn-off. On top of that, safety and quality issues have occasionally drawn negative attention. Several recalls, including issues related to the full self-driving beta software and problems with door latches or seatbelts, have reminded consumers that even high-tech vehicles are not immune to traditional automotive challenges. Regulatory scrutiny has also increased, with the US National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and other agencies around the world monitoring Tesla's technology more closely, especially in relation to autopilot and full self-driving features. Meanwhile, global dynamics are also shifting. In the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act offers significant incentives for EV buyers, but only if the vehicles are made in North America and meet certain battery sourcing requirements. Tesla is well positioned to benefit from this due to its domestic manufacturing presence, but it's not alone. General Motors, Ford, and other US-based manufacturers also stand to gain. In Europe, stricter emissions regulations are pushing all automakers toward electrification, and Tesla has responded by expanding production at its Berlin Gigafactory, aiming to produce hundreds of thousands of Model Ys annually for the European market. Still, China remains the most important single market for electric vehicles, and it's also the most competitive. Local brands like BYD, NIO, and XPeng have strong support from the Chinese government and are deeply attuned to local consumer preferences. Tesla has operated a major factory in Shanghai since 2020, and the plant has become central to the company's global operations. However, recent geopolitical tensions, as well as the growing strength of Chinese brands, mean that Tesla must constantly adapt to stay competitive in the region. It's also worth noting that while the automotive side of the business gets most of the attention, Tesla's energy division continues to grow. The company's solar panels, solar roof tiles, and battery storage products like Powerwall and Megapack are part of a broader vision of becoming an integrated sustainable energy company. These areas may become increasingly important to Tesla's long-term growth, especially as competition in the vehicle market intensifies. Overall, Tesla's position in the EV industry remains strong, but it's no longer uncontested. The company's early lead, built on innovation and bold vision, has given way to a much more competitive environment. To stay ahead, Tesla must continue to innovate, not just in technology, but also in how it manages pricing, production, public perception, and regulation. The next few years will determine whether Tesla can maintain its status as a market leader, or whether it becomes one of many major players in a rapidly evolving field. Either way, the electric vehicle revolution is well underway, and Tesla's role, while still vital, is just one part of a much larger story. The modern world is facing a growing challenge in dealing with truth, facts, and public perception. With the rapid growth of digital technology and social media, our access to information has increased dramatically. But so has the ease of spreading misinformation and shaping narratives that may not be grounded in objective truth. In this environment, understanding how information is constructed, delivered, and received has become more important than ever. The power of narrative, who tells the story, how it is told, and what is left out, plays a significant role in how societies function and how people make decisions. Public opinion is no longer formed just through traditional institutions like the press, schools, or government bodies. It is now shaped on platforms like Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. These platforms, while offering freedom of expression and a broader reach for individuals, also provide a fertile ground for conspiracy theories, polarization, and manipulated content. Where millions of people can create and share content instantly, it becomes harder to verify what's true and what isn't. As a result, people often find themselves stuck in echo chambers, surrounded by ideas that reinforce their existing beliefs and shut out opposing perspectives. At the heart of this problem is a shift in how we trust information. In the past, trust was often placed in institutions like newspapers, public broadcasters, or academic experts. But today, trust has become more fragmented. People are more likely to rely on peer networks, influencers, and independent content creators. This decentralization has its benefits. It allows for more diverse voices and challenges monopolies on truth. However, it also means that unchecked claims can go viral, and misinformation can appear as convincing as well-researched facts. One of the key issues driving this change is the way social media algorithms work. These systems are designed to show users content that keeps them engaged, often by playing to their emotions. Sensational content, fear-inducing headlines, and divisive takes tend to perform better than calm, nuanced explanations. This encourages creators to prioritize entertainment and emotional appeal over accuracy or depth. It also fuels outrage, tribalism, and a climate in which people are more concerned with winning arguments than understanding issues. The rise of alternative media outlets has further complicated things. Some of these platforms fill an important gap by covering topics that mainstream media ignores. Others, however, exploit the distrust in legacy media to push misleading or extremist content. In many cases, these outlets present themselves as truth-tellers who are simply exposing what others won't. This framing is powerful, especially for audiences who already feel alienated or suspicious of official narratives. But it can also lead people down a path where objective truth is dismissed in favor of emotionally satisfying stories. An important consequence of all this is the erosion of a shared reality. If people cannot agree on basic facts, it becomes nearly impossible to have productive discussions or solve problems together. Take climate change, for instance. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence, large segments of the public remain skeptical because they have been exposed to misleading claims that suit their worldview. The same applies to issues like vaccines, election results, or economic policies. Without a common understanding of the facts, society becomes divided into camps that see each other not just as wrong, but as dangerous. This situation is made worse by the declining state of traditional journalism. Many newspapers and media organizations have been forced to cut staff or close altogether due to falling revenues. This has created information deserts, where local news is scarce and people are left relying on national outlets that may not cover local issues in depth. It has also led to a click-driven model of journalism, where success is measured in page views and ad revenue rather than the quality or impact of the reporting. In this model, even credible outlets may be tempted to publish sensational stories or oversimplified takes to stay financially viable. There are efforts to combat these trends. Fact-checking organizations, media literacy campaigns, and algorithm reforms are all being explored as ways to restore trust and accuracy in public discourse. Some social media platforms have introduced labels or warnings for misleading content. Others have invested in partnerships with credible sources to promote reliable information. However, these efforts often face resistance from those who see them as censorship or bias. There is also the question of scale. Can fact-checkers keep up with the sheer volume of misinformation that circulates online every day? Education plays a vital role here. Teaching people how to critically evaluate information, identify sources, and distinguish between fact and opinion is essential. Media literacy should be part of every school curriculum, but adults also need tools to navigate the modern information landscape. It's not just about spotting fake news, it's about understanding the motivations behind the content we consume, the mechanics of online platforms, and the psychological biases that affect our judgment. Another dimension of this problem is how disinformation is used as a tool of influence and power. Authoritarian regimes, for example, have become skilled at using digital propaganda to maintain control and discredit opponents. But even in democratic societies, politicians and public figures often manipulate information to shape narratives in their favor. When trust in institutions is low, people may be more inclined to believe in conspiracy theories or simplistic explanations that confirm their existing suspicions. What we're witnessing then is not just a crisis of misinformation, but a broader struggle over truth itself. The question is not only what is true, but who gets to decide what is true. In a polarized environment, even the act of seeking truth can be seen as political. People may dismiss facts, not because they are false, but because they come from a source they don't trust. This creates a feedback loop where truth becomes relative and persuasion becomes a matter of performance rather than substance. One of the most dangerous outcomes of this trend is cynicism. When people feel they can't trust anything, they may stop engaging with the world altogether. This detachment can lead to apathy, disengagement from politics, and a weakening of democratic norms. If enough people stop believing that truth matters, then lies can flourish without challenge. Despite all these challenges, there are reasons for hope. There are still many journalists, educators, researchers, and everyday citizens working to uphold the value of truth. Innovations in technology can be used not only to spread misinformation, but also to amplify credible voices and foster thoughtful dialogue. Community-led initiatives, open-source investigations, and transparency in reporting are all ways to rebuild trust and encourage critical thinking. Ultimately, the solution to this crisis won't come from any one institution or platform. It will require a collective effort, a commitment to honesty, accountability, and the willingness to engage with complexity. It means resisting the temptation to reduce everything to black and white narratives, and being open to changing our minds when presented with new evidence. It also means holding those in power accountable for the information they share and the narratives they promote. In a world where attention is currency, truth often feels like a luxury, but without it, we risk losing the very foundation of a functioning society. The challenge is to make truth compelling again, to tell stories that are not only accurate, but also meaningful, human, and capable of cutting through the noise. Only then can we begin to repair the fractures in our shared understanding and move toward a future where informed decisions are once again possible.